Welcome to Occult Mysticism, your gateway to sacred knowledge. Today, we delve into the Rosicrucians, their rites and mysteries by Hargrave Jennings, a fascinating look at the rituals and hidden lore of the Rosicrucians. Join us as we uncover these ancient secrets. Subscribe for more esoteric insights. Among the great and strange books of the world, there are certain volumes which stand apart, not merely as repositories of accumulated knowledge, but as enduring monuments to a tradition of thought, so profound, so ancient, and so utterly contrary to the common, comfortable assumptions of men that they seem to be transmissions from another order of being, whispers from a forgotten age of giants. Such a work is that grand and contentious compilation, The Rosicrucians, Their Rites and Mysteries by Hargrave Jennings. To approach this book is to enter a vast and shadowy portico, leading not to a single, well-lit hall of learning, but to a veritable labyrinth of echoing corridors that connect, in ways unsuspected by the profane, the temples of every age and the philosophies of every clime. The author, writing in the latter half of the 19th century, a period rife with both the ironclad triumphs of a hard materialism and the answering, spectral whispers of a spiritual resurgence, presents himself not as an initiate, not as a sworn brother of the Rosy Cross himself, but as a historiographer of the arcane. He is a patient collator of scattered and misunderstood symbols, a reverent interpreter of those hermetic doctrines which he believed to be the one, unbroken golden thread running through the variegated and seemingly chaotic tapestry of all human mythology, religion, and primordial science. He declares, with the solemnity of one who has spent a lifetime in the dust of forgotten libraries, that his primary purpose is to sweep away and correct the shallow, prejudiced, and ultimately ignorant accounts of his day, which, in their smug self-satisfaction, dismissed the august and mysterious Rosicrucians as a fleeting and fanatical sect of dreamers that arose in 17th century Germany and quickly vanished into absurdity. He rails, with a scholar's righteous indignation, against the great encyclopedias and the supposed authorities of a soulless scholasticism, who, in their self-satisfied rationalism, dismiss the profoundest mysticisms of the ancients with a cursory and contemptuous paragraph. Of the Encyclopaedia Britannica's entry on the subject, he quotes its dismissive conclusion that the Rosicrucians proposed the most crude and incomprehensible notions and ideas in the most obscure, quaint, and unusual expressions. And he holds this pronouncement up as a perfect and melancholy example of the profane world's chronic inability to comprehend that which it has not the spiritual vision to see. For Jennings, these modern critics are like men born and raised in a subterranean dungeon, who, having never seen the sun nor felt its warmth, declare its very existence to be a fanatical and baseless superstition. His analysis is founded not upon these shifting sands of popular written history, but upon the granitic bedrock of universal archetypal symbolism. He builds his stupendous edifice of argument primarily with the mighty Cyclopean stones, hewn from the works of that great and inscrutable English master, Robertus de Fluctibus, or Robert Fludd, whom he venerates as the quintessential hierophant of the Rosicrucian mysteries in the modern age. A man whose vast Latin folios were a sealed book to his contemporaries, but which contained, for those with the eyes to see and the courage to understand, the very keys to the kingdom of nature and of God. It is the central, unwavering, and monumental thesis of this work that the fraternity of the Rosy Cross is not, as the profane world has long supposed, a mere society founded in Germany in the 17th century, but is rather the modern European name for a silent, secret, and continuous stream of philosophic illumination flowing from the most ancient and sacred springs of human thought. It is a tradition whose symbols lie buried in the foundations of every great temple, whose doctrines are whispered in the allegories of every living faith, and whose ultimate, magnificent aim has ever been the complete regeneration of man and his conscious restoration to the divine and immortal estate from which he has tragically fallen. This perennial philosophy, Jennings argues with the force of a lifetime of conviction, rests upon two mighty and inseparable pillars. The first, and most ancient, is a profound fire theosophy. This is the universal and primeval veneration of fire, not as a physical element to be worshipped with the vulgar idolatry of the senses, but as the purest, most active, and most immediate visible symbol of the ultimate, unknowable, and unnameable divine principle. the ever-living, ever-active spirit of which the entire cosmos is but a condensation, a shadow, and a temporary manifestation. The second pillar, which is the earthly reflection of the first, is the equally universal sanctification of the great generative principles of nature. The creative and productive forces which fill the world with life, symbolized from time immemorial by the upright and the circle, the pillar and the arc, the phallus and the yoni of the Eastern sages. These two, the celestial fire of the spirit and the terrestrial fecundity of nature, are not separate but are two aspects of a single divine mystery, the dual expression of the one creative life, the great cosmic marriage of heaven and earth. The evidence for this unbroken chain of wisdom, he contends with powerful and persistent logic, is not to be found in the annals of kings and the chronicles of war, for the Rosicrucians have ever sought to be invisible, to pass through the world unnoticed, influencing its destiny from behind the veil. Their true history is encoded in the enduring symbols which have survived the wreck of empires: the mighty pyramids of Egypt, the enigmatic round towers of Ireland, the cyclopean druidical stones of Britain, the mythic fleur-de-lis of France, the strange and holy legends of the Sangreal or Holy Grail, and the arcane constitutions of the great chivalric orders, such as the Knights of the Temple and the most noble Order of the Garter. Through an intricate and often startling method of associative logic, philological deduction, and symbolic interpretation, the book endeavors to demonstrate that all these diverse and scattered mysteries are but different spellings of the same ineffable name, varied expressions of the one eternal Rosicrucian truth. The discourse opens, as it were, in a region of twilight and profound wonder, with a narrative that at once establishes the unearthly, elusive, and almost terrible character of the fraternity. It is the strange adventure in Staffordshire, recorded by the sober and reliable antiquary Dr. Plott in the time of the Second Charles. We are asked to picture a simple countryman, at the close of a dull summer's day, his labor almost done, digging a trench in a lonely field surrounded by somber, silent woods. As the light of the world begins to fail, his heavy pick strikes something hard and stony in the earth, and a single, bright spark flashes out in the gathering gloom. Roused by a natural curiosity, he clears the soil and discovers a large, flat stone with a great iron ring set into its center. After much solitary toil, using a rope he had with him and the leverage of a bent tree, he contrives to raise the massive slab, revealing a dark, square opening and a stone staircase descending into the depths of the earth. With a courage born of rustic simplicity and the timeless hope of finding buried treasure, he lights a lantern and begins his descent into the cold, silent darkness. Far below, at a depth of what he judges to be 100 feet, he reaches a square landing, from which another flight of stairs descends at a right angle. He continues his descent, feeling his way in the oppressive tomb-like stillness, counting 220 steps, his senses now aware of a faint, aromatic smell, as of ancient incense wafting up from some hidden, subterranean world. At last, from the bottom of a yet deeper shaft, he sees a pale, steady light shining up as if from a distant, imprisoned star. Cheered by this impossible phenomenon, yet with his heart pounding in his chest, he presses on, his courage now at war with a rising, instinctual dread. He pauses, listens, and hears what he fancies to be the distant, muffled rumble of wagons moving on the surface of the earth far above, to which the distant light seems to flicker for a moment in mysterious response. He considers fleeing back to the familiar, fading world of the setting sun and the evening star, but the allure of the mystery is too great and compels him forward. At last, turning a final corner, he finds himself in a square chamber of massive, hewn stone, its roof exquisitely groined into the shape of a great, dark rose. As he stands in awe, another Gothic portal is revealed, and from it streams a brilliant golden radiance that blasts the darkness and illuminates the entire vault. He shrinks back, his limbs trembling, for there, within that illuminated sanctum, sits the figure of a man, ancient and robed, his face hidden in shadow as he pores over a great open book, his elbow resting upon a rectangular stone table. The entire scene is lit by a single, large, ancient iron lamp suspended by a thick chain from the center of the vaulted ceiling. A cry of pure alarm escapes the intruder's lips. He takes a single, involuntary step into the chamber. As his roughshod foot touches the sacred stone of the floor, the seated figure starts bolt upright. It erects its hooded head as if in awful silent astonishment and thrusts out a long skeletal arm, its hand grasping an iron baton, pointing as if to forbid any further approach. The countryman, now beside himself with a terror that masters all reason and all restraint, takes a second and then a third fatal step. As his final footfall descends upon the groaning stone, the dreadful guardian, moving with the swift and terrible precision of a machine, raises its arm high and strikes a prodigious blow upon the lamp, shattering it into 1,000 glittering pieces and plunging the vault into an absolute, thunderous, and eternal darkness from which there is no return. This story, Jennings insists with solemn gravity, is no mere country tale, but a profound and perfect allegory of the Rosicrucian secret. The hidden chamber is the secret repository of hermetic truth, accessible only to the worthy. The guardian is the adept, the silent watcher of the ages, whose knowledge is so far beyond that of ordinary men that he seems an automaton, a being moved by other laws, and the ever-burning lamp is the potent symbol of that immortal, secret science which the Rosicrucians possess, but which they are sworn under the most terrible oaths to protect from the profane, extinguishing the very light of knowledge rather than allowing it to be violated or misused by those who are unprepared for its world-altering power. This legend of perpetual fire, the author demonstrates with a wealth of curious learning, is no isolated fable but a persistent tradition woven through the accounts of the ancient and medieval world. He marshals a host of accounts from classical and later writers, each telling of the discovery of just such an inexplicable phenomenon. We are invited to enter, in imagination, the tomb of Tullia, the beloved daughter of Cicero, opened during the papacy of Paul III, where the body of a fair Roman maiden was found perfectly preserved, as if she had just fallen asleep, swimming in a strange, wonderful juice, her yellow hair bound with a golden circlet, and where lamps found burning under her feet were instantly extinguished by the inrush of the common air after more than 1,500 years of secret, silent light. We are told of the even more marvelous lamp found in the monument of Pallas, the son of Evander, which burned with such a marvelous and preternatural tenacity that neither wind nor water could extinguish its flame, and which was only mastered when the astonished discoverers, in their scientific curiosity, drilled a hole in its base and broke the perfect mechanism. We learn of the lamp found at Edessa in the reign of the Emperor Justinian, which, according to the inscriptions, had been lit shortly after the crucifixion and had burned for 500 years in its sealed niche until it was discovered and wantonly destroyed by the soldiers of the Persian king Khosroes, an act of sacrilege which was said to have brought a terrible and wasting plague upon their entire army. This inextinguishable flame, he argues, is the physical emblem of the imperishable spirit and the central arcanum of the alchemists, for they taught that it was possible to prepare from gold, the most perfect of all terrestrial substances, the very sediment of the sun's divine light, a perfect and eternal oil, a liquid sun, to feed a flame that could defy the ages by achieving a perfect and miraculous equilibrium between its fuel and its fire. But why, the world asks with its persistent and pragmatic incomprehension, if these philosophers possessed such stupendous secrets, the power to create inexhaustible wealth with the philosopher's stone and to prolong life indefinitely with the elixir of vitae, did they not master the world? Why did they choose poverty, obscurity, and a profound, impenetrable silence? Here, the book delves into the very soul of the adept, exploring the vast psychological and spiritual gulf that separates the enlightened mind from the petty and transient ambitions of ordinary men. The author explains, with a deep and resonant empathy, that the true Rosicrucian is a man who has transcended the world, not one who seeks to conquer it. By the time the philosopher has, through immense labor, unimaginable patience, and profound contemplation, penetrated the shimmering veil of nature and has witnessed the sublime and awful mechanics of creation, the toys for which other men strive, rank, riches, and temporal power, have become as dust and ashes to him. His is the profound weariness of the spectator of the ages, to whom all human ambitions, all the rise and fall of empires, all the passions and the sorrows of mankind, are but the transient plays of children in the brief afternoon of a summer's day. What is a king's crown to him who can command the spirits of the elements? What is a merchant's treasure vault to him who can create the purest gold from the dust beneath his feet? To such a being, a prolonged life in the flesh is not a blessing, but an almost insupportable burden, a continuation of the great melancholy of existence. The book evokes with powerful imagery the myth of the wandering Jew as an emblem for this superhuman state, a lonely, eternal traveler, untouched by the river of time, who watches the generations of men spring up like grass and perish like leaves about him, for whom all human affection inevitably turns to dust, and for whom the endless, monotonous repetition of suns and seasons becomes a sorrowful and tragic monotony. He is, in the terrible and sublime words of the legend, forgotten by death. It is from this sublime and lonely altitude of the spirit, this vast and sorrowful wisdom, that the Rosicrucian renounces the world, guards his secrets with a jealous care that the world mistakes for pride, and wraps himself in the cloak of utter invisibility, seeking not to be a king among men, but to be an unknown and unseen spectator of their fleeting and often tragic drama. As a tangible, historical proof of the literal existence of such immortals, the author recounts at length the celebrated and well-attested tale of the Signor Gualdi, the mysterious stranger who appeared in Venice in the latter part of the 17th century. He was a man of the most profound learning, of polished and elegant manners, and of seemingly moderate and independent mien, who fascinated the Venetian nobility with his discourse, which was so filled with the most intimate and casual detail of past events that he seemed to have been a direct eyewitness to the courts and councils of history. The mystery which surrounded him reached its astonishing climax when a Venetian nobleman, a great and respected connoisseur of art, was invited to Gualdi's apartments to view his small but exquisite collection of pictures. There, hanging in a place of no particular honor above a doorway, he saw a portrait of the Signor himself. The nobleman stared, his blood running cold, for he recognized with absolute and unshakable certainty the unmistakable hand of the great master Titian, who had then been dead for nearly 200 years. "That picture was intended for you, sir," he said to Gualdi at last, his voice filled with a strange mixture of courtly politeness and supernatural awe. "You look a moderately young man. To be candid with you, sir, I should say about 45 or thereabouts, and yet I know, by certain means, that this picture is by the hand of Titian. How is this possible?" Gualdi, a momentary and indescribable cloud passing over his brow, offered only a quiet, evasive reply about the deceptive nature of resemblances. He was polite, but the interview was over. The very next morning, he had vanished from Venice as silently and as tracelessly as he had arrived, leaving behind only the impossible portrait and a legend that would puzzle all of Europe. They are the specters of the ages. Having established the secret, elusive, and supernatural character of the Brotherhood, the discourse turns at last to the absolute core of their philosophy, the universal and primordial religion of fire. This, the author insists, is not the vulgar idolatry of a burning flame, but a profound theosophy which sees in fire the most perfect, most active, and most eloquent symbol of the divine. He traces this veneration from its ultimate source in the Holy Scriptures, where the presence of God is always announced by light and by fire, in the awful, world-shaking glory upon Mount Sinai, in the miracle of the burning bush which burned with fire but was not consumed, in the pillar of fire that guided the chosen people through the trackless wilderness. From this most sacred origin, the doctrine spread as a secret light throughout the ancient world, becoming the inner and hidden truth of every exoteric faith. The Magi of Persia, the holy priests of Zoroaster, did not worship the physical fire upon their altars, but adored the unseen, unnameable God through the fire as its purest and most glorious manifestation. The Vestal fires of Rome, which consecrated virgins, were sworn to keep eternally burning upon pain of death. The perpetual flames in the temples of Greece, the ever-shining lamps of the Gadatanian Hercules, all are shown to be the scattered and far-flung relics of this single primeval faith. But what, in its deepest sense, is this fire, which has commanded such universal and enduring reverence? Here, the book unveils the deepest and most challenging metaphysics of the Rosicrucians, a spiritual physics transmitted through the illuminated mind of Robert Flood that turns our common, sensory understanding of reality completely on its head. The universe, they taught, is not as it seems to us. We, in our world of solid, dark, and seemingly permanent matter, imagine that fire is the exception, a fleeting and destructive accident. But the Hermetic truth is the precise and staggering reverse. The entire cosmos, in its true state, is a vast, invisible, and infinite ocean of living spirit fire, and our entire material world is but a small, dark, condensed spot within it, a sediment, an ash, a cooling cinder of the eternal celestial flame. Physical fire, The visible flame that our eyes can see is the glorious and painful struggle of this inner spiritual fire to escape its material prison and return to its source. When we strike a spark from a flint, we are not creating fire. We are merely opening a momentary door, a violent rent in the fabric of matter, through which the eternal underlying fire of all existence reveals itself for a dazzling instant before vanishing back into the unseen from whence it came. Light itself, to the Rosicrucian, is material. And because it is material, it is a form of darkness when compared to the true, unmanifest spiritual light, which is God. To our limited human senses, this divine light is absolute darkness, just as to the inhabitants of that spiritual realm, our most brilliant material light is but a dim and passing shadow. This is the great secret of the fire philosophers, that all things were evolved out of this divine fire, and into it all things must ultimately be resolved. It is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega of all existence. And it is in solemn recognition of this stupendous truth that the peoples of the ancient world raised their mighty and enduring monuments. Every obelisk in Egypt that pierces the blue air with its needle of stone, every druidical menhir that stands lonely and gray upon the moors of Britain, every mighty pyramid, every soaring tower, every Gothic steeple that points its stone finger in silent prayer to the sky, is a testament to this first principle, a stationary, petrified, and enduring flame, symbolizing the eternal aspiration of the imprisoned spirit back towards its fiery home in the eternal bosom of God. From this grand unifying principle of the all-pervading fire faith, the author proceeds, with an astonishing display of erudition, to demonstrate its inseparable connection with the second great arcanum, the mysteries of generation, showing how the symbols of this power are likewise woven into the very fabric of all religion and all culture, often in the most unexpected and skillfully disguised of form. The most elaborate and breathtaking example of his symbolic method is his genealogical unfolding of the famous fleur de lis, the royal and sacred emblem of France. He begins with the name, demonstrating its evolution from the common tongue. Fleur de lis becomes flower de luce, which is nothing other than the flower of the luce, an old name for the pike. The pike, a fish, he associates through ancient and forgotten lore with a certain insect, which in turn is identified with the sacred scarab beetle of Egypt. This beetle, a powerful and ubiquitous symbol of creation, self-generation, and immortality, becomes, in its European transmission, the bee, the golden imperial emblem of the Emperor Charlemagne and later of Napoleon. The bees of France, as all armorists know, are emblazoned upon a field of azure blue. Blue is the color of the deep sea, Mer, and thus connects through a chain of sacred phonetics to the holy name of the Virgin Mary, Maria, a name which in its original Hebrew root signifies the bitterness or saltness of the sea. The sea is the great deep of Genesis, the primeval water, the universal symbol of the great feminine principle, the receptive matrix of all creation, the yoni of the Hindu sages. Thus, through a chain of symbolic association that spans millennia, crosses empires, and unites the most disparate of cultures, the familiar and elegant lily of France is revealed as a disguised, glorified, and sublimated emblem of the female generative power, sacred and royal symbol of the Great Mother from whom all life proceeds. This same powerful pattern of interpretation is then applied to a vast and bewildering array of other symbols from across the globe. The druidical monuments, the cromlechs and standing stones scattered across the Celtic world are identified as phallic pillars, or the lingam, the masculine counterpart to the yoni, testaments in unhewn stone to the active, creative, and solar principle. The mysterious and beautiful round towers of Ireland are rescued from the prosaic and demonstrably incorrect explanation that they were merely Christian belfries, and are revealed in their true light as ancient fire towers and sacred phallic monuments, identical in purpose and in origin to structures found across the East, from Persia to the furthest reaches of India. The Great Pyramid itself is interpreted not as a tomb for a forgotten king, but as the most colossal and enduring fire altar the world has ever seen, its four triangular faces representing the very shape of an aspiring flame, and its name, Pyramus, derived not from any Egyptian root, but from the universal Greek pyr, that is, fire. The so-called sarcophagus in the king's chamber is not a coffin at all, but the sacred receptacle, the holy urn, where the perpetual, ever-burning fire, the very heart of the temple's mystery, was maintained in its most secret and inaccessible adytum. All these interpretations are further illuminated by the strange and profound doctrines of the Gnostics and the Kabbalists, who understood the sacred stories of the world not as literal history, but as grand and beautiful allegories of the cosmic processes of creation, fall, and regeneration. The Rosy Cross itself, the central and most holy emblem of the fraternity, is shown to be a pre-Christian symbol of the most universal significance, representing the sacred union of the active and passive generative principles, the crucifixion of the divine spirit in the fourfold cross of matter, and the glorious promise of its ultimate resurrection into light, a symbol found in the temples of India and Egypt long before the dawn of the Christian era. Even the ominous and peculiar superstition surrounding the color white, as being fateful for the royal house of England, is traced with patient care through a long and sorrowful series of historical tragedies, from the loss of the White Ship in the 12th century to the sad and deposed Richard II, who was called the White Hart, and finally to the public execution of King Charles I, the White King, before his own London Palace of Whitehall, all presented as chilling evidence of a deep, symbolic, and magical correspondence that our modern science cannot explain, but that history mysteriously and tragically affirms. The second part of the grand discourse carries these powerful principles into the historical era, demonstrating the hidden presence of the Rosicrucian philosophy within the very heart of European civilization, most notably in the great and powerful orders of chivalry, which were the glory of the Middle Ages. The Knights Templar are presented not merely as pious soldiers of the cross, but as the inheritors, perhaps unwittingly, of ancient Gnostic wisdom. The strange and terrible charges of heresy brought against them at the time of their cruel suppression, of worshipping a mysterious bearded head, a so-called Baphomet, and of denying the reality of the crucifixion, are reinterpreted as a profane and malicious misunderstanding of their veneration for Gnostic symbols of the divine wisdom or Sophia, the secret mother of the cosmos, and of their adherence to the Gnostic doctrine that the divine Christus could not suffer physically, but only in appearance. Their famous banner, the black and white bosant, is shown to be no mere battle flag, but a profound diagram of the dualistic nature of the created universe, the two great principles of spirit and matter, light and darkness, the active and the passive, held in a state of eternal equilibrium and opposition. But it is in the analysis of that most illustrious and enduring of all chivalric institutions, the most noble order of the Garter, that the author's method reaches its most audacious and startling climax. The popular and romantic tale of its origin, that King Edward III, with a gesture of great gallantry, retrieved a lady's garter at a crowded court ball, is dismissed as a beautiful and necessary veil, a graceful exoteric fable created to hide a mystery too profound and too sacred for the vulgar to comprehend. By examining the most ancient records and the precise etymology of the original Latin terms used in the order's statutes, Jennings argues with formidable erudition that the object in question, the sublegaculum, was not a garter for the leg, but an intimate girdle or cincture worn about the body by the lady. The incident, therefore, which history has treated as a trifle, was one of a deeply personal and sacredly feminine nature, one which in a coarser age or in the presence of coarser minds might have provoked scandal and derision. King Edward's act of retrieving it and elevating it into the highest symbol of his new and glorious order was an act of supreme chivalric delicacy and profound mystical insight, a conscious and deliberate transformation of a symbol of potential shame into one of transcendent honor. For the Order of the Garter, he reveals, is a sacred institution dedicated to the veneration of the mystery of the feminine principle. The garter itself is the consecrated symbol of the yoni. The famous and enigmatic motto, Honi soit qui mal y pense, is a sacred defense of this mystery, with the archaic honi being a secret homophone for yoni, rendering the true and hidden meaning as shame be to him who thinks ill of it. The order's other symbols are all shown to align perfectly with this central secret. Its 26 nights represent the 13 light and 13 dark phases of the lunar year, the moon being the celestial ruler of the feminine. Its original red and white roses symbolize the dual mysteries of female physiology, and its profound patronage by the Blessed Virgin Mary confirms its ultimate dedication to the apotheosis of woman, through whom came both the fall of man and the possibility of his redemption. The Garter is thus revealed as the Christian perpetuation of the ancient mysteries of King Arthur's Round Table, which itself was a grand astronomical and generative symbol of the same creative matrix, the sacred enclosure for the Holy Grail. From these historical manifestations, the work finally descends into the deepest and most abstract doctrines of the Rosicrucian masters, laying bare their magical and alchemical view of the universe. The cosmos, as taught by the great Robert Fludd, is a great musical instrument, a divine harmony in which all things, colors, sounds, letters, and numbers are but different octaves of the same celestial and creative song. The planets, in their grand and silent courses, produce the true music of the spheres. And the soul of man resonates with this divine harmony because he is a microcosm, a perfect miniature replica of the macrocosm, the great universe. His head, the seat of intellect, is an image of the Empyrean world of angels and pure thought. His heart and chest, the seat of life and passion, are an image of the etherium world of stars and vitality. His abdomen and generative system are an image of the lower elementary world of physical forms and mutable matter. This astro-theosophical system provides the unshakable foundation for the practice of magic, which is the high art of manipulating the secret sympathies and hidden correspondences that link the small world of man to the great world of the cosmos. Alchemy, in its turn, is revealed to be not merely a sordid physical art for the creation of gold, but a sublime spiritual science for the perfection of the soul. The true great work is not the making of material gold, but the purification and redemption of the human spirit. The alchemist is a midwife to nature, a philosopher who understands that all of creation is engaged in a slow, evolutionary, and often painful struggle to perfect itself, to cast off its base, leaden impurities, and evolve towards the incorruptible perfection of gold, which is the ultimate physical symbol of the liberated and glorified spirit. The true philosopher's stone, the lapis philosophorum, is the perfected soul of the adept himself, a spiritual ferment capable of transmuting the base nature of all around it, raising it from darkness towards the divine light. The final, most profound doctrines touch upon the Kabbalistic mysteries of the very origin of our world. The Rosicrucians, it is taught, believe our universe to be built upon the ruins of a prior spiritual angelic creation, a first ruin brought about by the fall of celestial spirits into the darkness of matter. Our own human fall was the second ruin, the descent from a unified, androgynous, and spiritual state into the painful duality of sexual generation. Our present world is therefore a place of penance, a long and sorrowful pilgrimage of the separated halves of the original human soul seeking to find each other across the ages and become one again, to heal the great wound of creation and return to the pleroma, that is, the higher divine intellect or fullness of divine light, from which all things first emanated. In the end, this work stands as a majestic and challenging testament to a forgotten way of seeing the world. It is a vast and intricate synthesis that seeks to demonstrate that beneath the mundane surface of recorded history, behind the dogmatic veil of exoteric religion, and hidden within the familiar and often unnoticed forms of art and architecture, there lies a single, secret, and sacred doctrine. It is the wisdom of the Magi, the philosophy of the Gnostics, the science of the alchemists, and the enduring faith of the Rosicrucians. It is the doctrine of the divine fire which is the life of all things, and of the sacred generative mystery by which that life is brought into being and perpetuated through the ages. It challenges the modern world's confident and ultimately sterile materialism with the ancient world's profound and life-giving spiritualism. Whether one chooses to accept its extraordinary claims as literal truth or to see them as a grand and intricate allegory of the soul's long and arduous journey, the book leaves the reader with an unshakable sense of a world far more mysterious, more magical, and more profoundly meaningful than is dreamt of in our common philosophy. It leaves us standing before the unopened door of the Rosicrucian sanctuary, with the chastening and sublime understanding that the truest knowledge is not that which is shouted from the housetops and debated in the noisy forums of men, but that which is whispered in silence from one generation of the wise to the next, forever inviting our wonder and forever guarding its ultimate and inviolable secret. Thank you for exploring the Rosicrucians, their rites and mysteries with occult mysticism. Share your thoughts below and join our community. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more Rosicrucian wisdom. Until next time, keep seeking the mysteries.